back to Defence Talk, Securing the Key Advantage, a podcast brought to you by the Council on Geostrategy in partnership with trade association ADS Group and sponsored by industry powerhouse BAE Systems. Here, we continue to explore the key questions shaping defence, technological and national security agendas in the UK. And Paul, Christmas is around the corner. It's almost holiday season, and I think this time around we would like probably to focus on a slightly different topic, but a very timely one and a very important one. Now, there are a couple of reasons for that aside, putting aside the Christmas season. First of all, the Defence Housing Strategy 2025 has just been launched, and it's a very, very important document which we will be unpacking today with our guests. Now, this strategy, published last month, is a £9 billion 10-year program that aims to modernise 40,000 homes and build an additional 100,000 homes for defence personnel. But in addition to this, of course, earlier this year we had the SDR launched, and SDR identified a crucial problem which we must address if we want to end the hollowing out of our armed forces and also lead in a stronger and more lethal NATO. And crucially, it is the case that many service personnel are dissatisfied with accommodation, and the SDR explicitly links years of squeezing funding for the maintenance of service family accommodation and single living accommodation to the recruitment retention crisis.
Yes, and hi, Victoria. It's a time when we are coming towards the end of the year. We're still waiting for the Defence Investment Plan, and we'll hopefully get it on the near-term horizon. But we've had now a series of statements from HMG about defence strategy, the SDR, the National Security Strategy, know this, and we're being asked to have a whole of society conversation about the positives about defence at a time when, of course, the government has taken back in-house, taken back into public control the MOD housing estate, but we still have service families saying it's not good enough. We're now seeing maybe turning the corner, recruiting more people to the armed forces than we're losing. But this stuff is absolutely central, as we'll hear from our two guests.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, it's all about people, and accommodation is one of the most important things when it comes to the quality of life. So without any further delay, let's perhaps present our guests today.
We're delighted to welcome today Calder, a housing specialist with the Army Families Federation. Kat is a housing professional with over 13 years of experience advocating for improved living conditions for families in military accommodation. Representing the Tri-Service Families Federation, that's Navy, Army and Royal Air Force, she has direct experience of military housing, having previously lived in service family accommodation, which is called SFA in the jargon, for a number of years. Welcome, Kat.
Thank you. And we are, of course, also absolutely delighted to welcome Natalie Elphicke, who is the Chair, Defence Housing Strategy Review Team and Director and Head of Housing, the Housing and Finance Institute. Now, previously, Natalie chaired the New Homes Quality Board on Standards and Redress for Customers of New Built Homes. She also co-chaired the Elphicke House Report 2015 on the role of local authorities in housing supply and served as an expert advisor on the development of the National Strategy for Estate Regeneration. Welcome, Natalie. So we are delighted to have you joining us today, and we are very much looking forward to our conversation about the strategy, but also a broader conversation about what can we do aside from these strategy documents to improve the living conditions to our serving personnel and also their families. So first of all, perhaps maybe let's begin with this document. So fresh from the oven, just a couple of weeks old, early November, published, and we would be very keen together with Paul to understand why now and what is the essence?
So why now comes out of the reacquisition, the buyback of the Allington estate, and that was the deal going back now into John Major's time that privatised defence homes and has limited the ability of the Ministry of Defence to deal with its own housing estate and improve it since. So at the beginning of the year, John Healey, the Defence Secretary, brought those homes back into public ownership, and then charged me as chair and Kat and our fantastic panel working with the experts within the Ministry of Defence to work out what we could do to make this buyback the start of a generational transformation and change that would really sort this out once and for all for service personnel and their families.
So what was the exact review process? Could you please tell us a bit more who else was involved and how did you approach it?
So the review panel had experts, Kat, and perhaps you'll talk a bit about the role that we had in terms of the engagement with the survey. In particular, the questionnaire, we went out to families, over 6,000 of them. And the work of the panel was involving external experts, particularly around property and housing, finance and associated matters, but also working very closely with the experts within the Ministry of Defence itself, so that what came out of the strategy was something that could be, practical, deliverable, fundable, and ultimately would make that difference. It wouldn't just be another document on the shelf or on the table. Do you want to talk a bit about the family's involvement?
Absolutely. So as the representative for the Families Federations, we were commissioned by the panel, myself as well, to carry out a questionnaire. We sent it out to all families and all serving personnel for all services. So it was tri-service. We had over 6,300 people responding to the survey, which is a fantastic amount. Really, it was the importance is that these houses, these homes are homes. They're the family's homes. So it's so important to have the voice of the families heard and listened to and included during the decision making, so that the homes that are being built are fit for purpose, but also fit for the lifestyle that our families have, both now and in the future.
And maybe you could tell us a bit more about that, because obviously some military people listen to this podcast and people in the defence industry do, but many people outside of it have no idea what is specific about Armed Forces family life. Maybe we could just run through some of that.
So it's a very varied life. There are varying degrees of mobility between the services. Some families and serving personnel are posted every 2 years. That's an incredibly tough time on the family, having to uproot, move to a new house, find a new school, find new spousal employment, maybe find another healthcare provider, and all of this within a very short space of time. So it can be very stressful for families. But having a home that is warm, fit for purpose, low costs for bills makes a huge difference for those families. Basically, if you get the house right, it's much easier to deal with all the difficult things that families are coping with otherwise.
And I mean, to put that in context, in terms of the evidence that we had for the review, there were situations where families were arriving to move into their new homes, and they didn't know whether or not their furniture would fit. They didn't have floor plans or photographs, and then they would come to the home. Sometimes they couldn't move into the home just as they were arriving because it wasn't clean or it wasn't finished. I mean, it was really upsetting. It is a really upsetting situation when that happens. So it's about addressing the physical estate in the defence housing strategy and getting that right, but also about putting families first in terms of the role of the new defence housing service that's being established. And that's to make sure that that family experience, right from moving in to any problems that are experienced, to actually helping families understand the options around home ownership and move on housing, both during and when they leave service, that's really, really critical, because the sacrifice that families make, forces families make, is incredible. And it's absolutely right that that's properly understood and supported.
Absolutely.
I'm very glad that we are talking about this topic today. And I mean, the situation is not rosy, and I've got some stats here. And for example, nearly 6 out of 10 military families live in the defence family housing. But when it comes to the satisfaction degree, I believe only 1 in 4 or so are more or less content with what they've got, and the vast majority actually are not content. So what are the key reasons? What are the key problems which you have encountered for your work? Why this problem exists in the first place?
I think a lot of it is to do with the currently it's getting better. We are seeing a better picture, but in the past there have been issues with repairs being done on a fix-on-fail basis. So things aren't being fixed correctly, work that's being done isn't being done properly. Maybe there's a job that's done, but then you need follow-on work. So you've had somebody in to redo the shower, the tiles had to come off, and then you have to chase to get the tiles put back on, and then you have to chase to get paintwork done. So it's all very difficult with that. But also, as Natalie was saying, with the move-ins, getting the move-in right makes life so much easier for a family going through. So if we can enable families to move into homes that are in the right location, of the right size, warm, comfortable, decent energy performance, and life will be so much easier.
So, Natalie, there are 3 key pillars in this strategy. Can we please perhaps start with the very first one, which is called a generational renewal? What do you mean by generational renewal?
Well, the generational renewal pillar is about making sure that this opportunity that there is transforms the entirety of the defence housing estate. And what we found when we have done the research and the evidence finding for the review is a shocking 9 in 10 defence homes need upgrading, modernising, or indeed completely replacing. So 3 in 10 are so serious that they need substantial refurbishment or replacing entirely. So the situation of the defence housing estate is significantly worse than I think people had thought it was, even though it was known it's obviously been a concern for a very long time. Now, when we're talking about that upgrading and modernising, it is making sure that it is something where homes are provided that are appropriate for the type of forces living, and also a warm, comfortable, cheaper to run, thermally efficient, modern homes, comfortable homes of the right size that are fit for purpose.
And the second pillar is forces first, and we would have kind of hoped that was already a pillar of strategy. I'm interested in how the Defence Housing Service will work. Is it the champion of the families? Is it whose side is it on, as it were? Because all housing arrangements, for anybody who's ever lived in a council house, are ultimately there are sides and you have to decide who represents you. How will that work?
So I think to explain the organisation first and then talk about the involvement of the Forces Family Federations and the family voice going forward. During the strategy, we did feel that actually the organisational structure within the Ministry of Defence was contributing to this very poor outcome for housing. What do I mean by that? Housing is very different from a number of other things that happen in the MOD, and it hasn't always got the priority, the focus, the dedication. The whole sort of organisational structure that it needs often gets funding given and then taken away. So actually setting up a new organisation that could be standalone, dedicated, with the right skills, with the right competencies, that really understood what its role was and actually supported those outcomes in an independent and dedicated way is absolutely at the heart of the strategy. But to make sure that that family's voice continues to be embedded, the structure is going to be set up that will have the Forces Family Federations involved in its independent governance, so still independent, but involved in it, and also to make sure that there's a continuing voice of the family at the heart of the discussions and decisions around particularly accommodation policy changes, because that hasn't always happened in the past. So it's a big cultural change.
Huge cultural change. It's going to be really exciting to see families' views either directly or indirectly via the family federations brought forward, taken into consideration, and actually listened to. Families are the people that live in the homes. They are the people that can tell you what will work and what won't work to a certain degree. Yes.
And it was really great, wasn't it? In the questionnaire responses, you asked people if they'd like to be involved in some focus groups and helping us with the work going forward.
Absolutely. We had well over 1,000 people out of that 6,000 that responded, saying that who left their contact details to say that they really wanted to be involved in this going forward. So we're going to be taking that forward in the form of focus groups initially. So some of those families who left their contact details, hopefully a vast majority of them, will be contacted to see if they're still interested. And if they are, then they will be involved in these focus groups. And that is just a game changer. That never happened before.
And that's things like getting families' voices and experiences in terms of the renewal standards, what's going to be provided. There's been some really significant changes that have come in around pets and patios and paint colours, and really making sure that the things that are coming forward are things that will really help families in the future. And we're continuing to listen and improve the services as well as we go through.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, having a good housing structure means that it will encourage people that signing up, that actually families are going to be valued. And that is a huge piece. I mean, our retention work that we we don't specifically do retention work, but we hear from the evidence that housing is a lot of the reason for many people to actually leave. So if we can get the housing right, encourage the families, prove to the families that this is a family favourable option, then that will, increase retention and recruitment going forwards, hopefully.
We'll get back to the topic of retention and recruitment later in the recording, but I know that there's also a third pillar in the strategy, and it is called Delivering for the Nation. So, of course, the MOD owns, well, I think around 1.4% of land. So perhaps when you compare it, it's not a huge percentage, but ultimately when you think about the size of the country, it's quite a sizable chunk of the country. And then in addition to this, of course, well, this housing problem is not only limited to the armed forces community or to the serving personnel and their families, but also we have similar issues as well, just generally with the civilian population as well. So what are the synergies that could potentially be explored when it comes to how do we deliver for the nation?
So Defence does have a huge amount of land, is one of the largest landowners, and making sure that that land is released where it's not needed and put to good use for housing and infrastructure is really important for the nation as a whole. And so the work that we've done is to look at the reasons why some of that land is not sometimes released, how it could be released, and I think critically how it could benefit not just the nation as a whole, but actually forces, families and forces serving personnel as well. And so we've developed an approach called Forces First, which will see this land when it's brought forward, some of that land and some of the houses that are built on that land being specifically set aside and allocated first for serving personnel and veterans. In the evidence that we had to the strategy, a number of veterans charities and housing associations talked to us about the challenges they found in getting access to land to build housing and support for veterans. We think it's really important that defence land, first and foremost, works for defence purposes, but it will also, with its huge capacity, up to 100,000 homes that can be delivered, contribute to the nation as a whole.
It's quite incredible, isn't it, the size? If you think, I don't think 1% of the UK is a small percentage, but it's a, like you say, it feeds into the wider mission of government to renew, it wants to build 1.5 million new homes. It wants to, at the same time, reduce energy costs. It wants to, at the same time, increase energy efficiency and resilience of the whole estate. So there's a lot that could be done there. What's the low-hanging fruit that you think what could we see by the end this time next year that could be different to what's been done in the past?
I think the key thing is with a new dedicated defence developments focus, what that will enable is really professional, fast, delivery on the planning and delivery side, and what we will see is homes coming forward, as I say, that can be used for military as well as for civilian populations. Now, within that, there is a huge need, about 14,000 new homes that are needed to meet operational military requirements for housing. So that's a very big building programme that needs to happen in order to support the military need. But beyond that, there is just so much more capacity for things to be delivered.
I would be also keen to understand a bit more what else we need to think about when it comes to the quality of life of the serving personnel and families as well. So what are the other elements? We have explicitly focused on the housing and the housing problem, but what are other things we need to think about when we think about how do we improve the quality of life of serving personnel?
I think, as I discussed earlier, the moving house is just the first step. It's the ensuring that there's good access to schools, that there's access to spousal employment. That's a relatively big issue, obviously with the cost of living at the moment and potentially unintended consequences or unexpected expenses for moving, such as the need for a second car. Families need that second income. We need to be that two-income family, so they need to be able to find a new job. Spouses need to be able to find a new job. They need to be able to find childcare if they've got a job. So it's all of those aspects wrapped up into one, again, with the home at the heart of it.
What is the support network? So, of course, well, Ministry of Defence has just published the strategy. I know, Kat, that you also represent an organisation which is very actively and intimately involved with all these issues. But what are other charities, other organisations we need to think about when we think about that support network?
There are a whole raft of charities that support forces families, either while they're serving, for single, for married, or for those who have left and are veterans. And they all have their own unique skill set for helping forces families. You know, I would just encourage any forces family who is looking for issues, obviously, who has issues, obviously approach their families federations first. If it's not necessarily an MOD issue, then all of the families federations have specialists that can advise or signpost to the correct charities in the outskirts.
And I think one of the things that we found when we were developing the strategy is that there isn't always, you know, very complete information about all the services that are available. And that includes the housing services. One of the recommendations is the development of a one-stop shop to bring together all of the information around where people can access housing and other services, including the Valor Hub services, and further support. And there are some really good examples in the sort of the main housing market, main support system, where people are really trying to help and to provide access to facilities for veterans and serving personnel. But the information and the knowledge about those isn't complete. So the more we can do to make sure that, you know, there are routes to connect information and people to the services and the provisions that they need, the better.
Absolutely.
I think that in defence, we generally, we're spending a lot of time trying to just say, hello, this exists. Would everybody please just focus on this? It's quite important. What can we do to sell what you are doing to the wider public and what the MOD needs to do? I mean, the obvious thing is everyone gets a chance to get more land where we can develop housing. But are there other bits of it, more specific, granular bits that are in there that could really deliver, as it were, benefits wider than to the actual families themselves?
Well, I think particularly around sort of skills and employment and training opportunities, we've identified that through the delivery of both the renewal programme, 50,000 homes in total obviously being managed, around 40,000 of those being renewed or upgraded. That is a huge, that's a huge regeneration and development programme. In addition, the 100,000 programme right across the country, there are opportunities, including in regional areas, to bring together skills and training. And one of the things that we know within the construction sector is it's very difficult to get those opportunities where there's a multi-year programme for apprentices to come on and train and come through. So we think there's a really good opportunity to bring together skills, employment and training alongside all the other benefits that the Defence Housing Strategy will bring, and that will be benefits right across the country.
We have already touched on the fact that, well, housing is a big subject and it takes time to plan and to build and actually to invite people to move in and organize all of this. So it's a long-term thing. How do we address certain issues mid-term and, well, short-term as well to ensure that satisfaction with the service life and also, well, I guess just that overall moral of the serving personnel is high?
Well, we've hit the ground running, haven't we?
Haven't we
So in April, the Consumer Charter was announced, which was the first step of the work that had been ongoing, which set the new move-in standard and new expectations for how service families would be treated. And that's been built on with the worst 1,000 homes currently in progress to be completed by the end of this year. So to make sure that those are turned around and improved. And off the back of the housing strategy, work is underway to identify the next stage of the renewal homes and to set out a renewal plan together with the first steps on the building plan. But importantly, it is about making sure that service provision to families, making sure that families are listened to, responded to, the complaint system is better, and the repair system is more reactive. All those elements are already underway. Now, it will take time to improve things to the level that we want, but we were very clear that a long-term plan in the usual sense was not what we were looking to do. It's a 10-year physical regeneration and renewal plan for the Defence Housing Estate as a whole. But the steps to actually start to improve families' experience have started right from the word go. And the Defence Secretary, John Healey, was absolutely clear that he wanted to see change happen and happen straight away. And we've had such strong support to start to make that happen.
And I think families are still seeing change. I mean, as Natalie said, it's a 10-year plan. There are going to be some families who aren't going to see big changes for quite a while, because they may not be in an area where work is being done initially, or they may move just as work is about to start. That's the nature of service life. But the various things have been happening, as you said, with the Charter and the consumer standard. The ability for families to have pets more easily without having to go through a big rigmarole of asking for permission. Just this week, the announcement came for the enhancements. Used to be called encroachments, not a nice word, but permanent enhancements that families can now do. They can fund them themselves in their own SFA, and they don't have to take them away at the end of the process. In the past, you could paint your property, you could put things up, you could put shelves up, you could put hooks up, but you had to take everything down and make it all good at the end of the process. This is going to make life so much easier for families moving into it. And it's those incremental steps that will start to set the ball and have set the ball rolling.
How do you measure success? It's such a complex subject. So, of course, well, you talk to those families. Of course, you conduct those surveys. But also, are there any other ways? You know, in business, people like to talk about KPIs. Then, of course, well, there's probably a certain methodology which you are thinking about on a daily basis. Could you please explain a bit more about that?
So one of the key and important factors for defence homes is that it is something that is the responsibility of the entire nation, and people feel quite rightly responsible for it. So within the Defence Housing Strategy is a requirement for the new Defence Housing Service to be accountable to Parliament as well as to ministers, and for there to be an annual report that will set out progress against the Decent Home Standards, and it will also there will also be public information about the renewal plan, so the stages that are being progressed and how those are being worked through in terms of the overall renewal of the defence housing estate. So there are going to be some ways in which the progress of this, as it is implemented, will be accountable and transparent. But equally, we don't want those KPIs to be all about the business, because the thing that's at the heart of it is the people.
It's the satisfaction.
So we are looking at the satisfaction measures, and there will be a new customer committee that will be at the heart of the new Defence Housing Service. Kat and colleagues will be part of the new Defence Customer Committee and be able to help drive through and test what those metrics, what that satisfaction is. Because at the end of the day, we want service families to be happier in their homes.
Absolutely.
I suppose it's a good time to broaden it out to the issue of how does what you're doing here shape the wider recruitment and retention agenda? I mean, could you, Kat, give us maybe an overview of the problems? We've all seen the surveys, we've all seen the numbers. What are the things that drive problems with recruitment and retention, and how do you see this fitting into that wider issue?
Where we concentrate is on how the serving community experience life.
Yeah.
So our evidence will be based on what they bring to us. So it's where our evidence stems from. We can offer views, we can offer analysis, and show where policies and process are more likely to aid retention. But the housing does play a huge role. Families consistently tell us that poor accommodation is one of the main reasons that they have decided to leave the forces. When homes are outdated or hard to maintain, it sends the wrong message. But conversely, when housing is modern, safe, well maintained, energy efficient, it just shows families that they are actually valued. And I think that will make a big difference to keeping the skilled personnel that we need to keep.
And I think there's an important difference between the different services as well in terms of that mobility pattern and opportunity. And so making sure that within the housing strategy, in addition to supporting really good quality defence homes, there are opportunities for people to get a home of their own, to whether that's while they're in service or when they leave service. And that schemes like the Forces Help to Buy, that's kind of reinvigorated along with savings product schemes to help that journey into home ownership.
Yep.
So can we perhaps talk a bit more about this life after service? How does the strategy support people who decide to leave? And perhaps there are some additional initiatives, additional programs?
So with the Forces First incentive, that will help families. We're looking to extend the radius where you can stay in your own property, which means that families will have more of an ability to establish themselves in a local community, and that should help them with moving on into the local community as well.
And when we think about the family life and families more generally, of course we think about the next generation. What lasting impact do you hope this strategy will have on the future generations?
It's giving families and the future generations that hope and that confidence that their families will be looked after if they join the military.
And also it will be about ensuring that there is operational defence readiness for the nation, because one of the key findings was, in addition to the homes being extremely poor quality in many instances, and the experience being very appalling too, the right number of homes were not in the right places to actually meet operational need. So that kind of forecasting with the military to make sure that homes are provided where they're needed, so that they can support operational readiness, is absolutely critical. And there are two further areas of review that were recommended in the families housing work, which were a review of SLA, the single living accommodation, and a review of the overseas estate. So, over the time, we will hope to get a more complete picture of the accommodation offering, both from a condition, but also from an operational readiness perspective for the armed forces, to make sure that it's fit for purpose.
Yeah. And it's the operational effectiveness for the serving person, but it's also the community for the families that are left behind when that action is necessary. So it means that everyone is properly looked after.
I suppose on that note, with Christmas coming, we should say thank you to all the people who serve and all the families who support them. They're very. We all see the photo opportunity at Christmas or New Year's time with serving personnel, but we very rarely see the people left back at home who are equally making a sacrifice for the country.
They are, yeah.
And a crucially important support network, of course, for the serving personnel. Yeah. Natalie, Kat, thank you so much for your incredibly important work, and thank you so much for finding time to come today to the studio and share your insights, and also more information about this strategy, which you can find online, and it's called the Defence Housing Strategy 2025. So you can download your copy directly from the website. And Paul, well, I guess it's time to say goodbye, and yes, we'll see each other in the new year in 2026, and we will be back with many more exciting episodes as part of our podcast, Defence Talks. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to speaking with our guests and seeing you next year.
Goodbye.
Thanks.